communism in Czechoslovakia has died. The playwright was at the forefront of his country's Velvet Revolution, helping it break free of Soviet domination. Simon McGregor-Wood looks back at Havel's life.
The leader of a small country who became a giant on the global stage, a statesman who was at least the equal to many with whom he rubbed shoulders. Václav Havel's standing stemmed from his commitment to the freedom of the individual and to the power of ideas and human rights. And in the last days of communism, no idea was more powerful to him than an independent Czechoslovakia, unshackled from Soviet domination. In November 1989, Havel led the Velvet Revolution, inspiring the Czech people to claim their freedom.
He was firmly of the opinion that the values that Europe represented was far stronger than what any totalitarian power could control over time.
A great man, a real example. We will miss him. May he rest in peace.
Czechs had bid for freedom before in the Prague spring of 1968. Moscow sent in the tanks then. The true face of Soviet power was laid bare. 20 years later, the Soviet system had collapsed. Czech freedom would not be denied this time. Russian tanks went home. In 1990, the former playwright and political dissident became Czechoslovakia's first post-communist president. In 1993, he was re-elected as president of the new Czech Republic, having overseen the peaceful separation of the new Slovak nation. He never lost his common touch or forgot where his support came from.
In the last 20 years, I was not only a guy holding a guitar, I was an ordinary citizen, and as such, I always trust you.
The subversive intellectual who'd been jailed repeatedly was now a global figure, and he would remain president until 2003. But for all his presidential achievements, like bringing his nation full circle to join NATO, his place in history is assured. His defining triumph, the emergence of his beloved country into freedom after years of subjugation. His was the voice of an impassioned intellectual, a gentle rebel who refused to be intimidated and inspired his people to claim their freedom in Wenceslas Square. Simon McGregor-Wood, Al Jazeera.
Well, let's learn more about the man now. Paul Wilson was a close friend of Václav Havel and his English translator, and joins us now from Ontario in Canada via Skype. Thanks for joining us to talk about your friend, because he was one of those rare people who made a difference to the world we live in, and the world is poorer for his loss. And you, as I say, must particularly be feeling it because he was a good friend of yours.
Yes, I was a friend of his in the sense that I translated a lot of his prose works and some of his plays. And as his translator, I basically got inside his mind. And so in that sense, we were quite close.
So tell us about his mind. What was it about this man that made him so great?
Well, I think it was, just put it very simply, he was a man who stuck to his guns. He had certain beliefs, and he always acted on those beliefs. He didn't just sit around passively expressing his beliefs or getting his, his criticism across in pub conversations. He actually believed that if you took a stand, you had to actually act in accordance with that stand and try to change the world.
Right. Now, we just saw a picture of you and him together. You were a member of a rock band, weren't you? And that led to the two of you meeting. Is that right?
Well, yes. I was a member of the Plastic People of the Universe for a couple of years, and the organizer of the Plastic People, the director, the manager, Ivan Uros, who just recently died himself, connected with Havel, and Havel really understood in a very visceral way how important this underground rock scene was in terms of cultural opposition. And so it was that connection that brought us together. He defended the Plastic People when they were arrested in 1976. And in the course of that defense, he realized that it wasn't just intellectuals who were opposed to the regime, it was ordinary people. Because most of the people in this underground rock scene were just working class kids who wanted to do what they wanted to do. And in taking a stand and taking serious risks in defending this group of people, he realized that there was a whole new way of opposing these regimes. And that led to the founding of the human rights movement, Charter 77, which eventually got him in prison for 4.5 years.
Right, he was a real visionary, wasn't he? Tell me, what was he like to work with? Because often people of his stature can be difficult to deal with on a personal level.
He was a prince. What can I say?
Yeah.
He's a very modest man, shy and even self-effacing. I mean, if you look at the last play that he wrote a couple of years ago called Leaving, he characterizes a person very much like himself in very ironic terms. But beneath that very modest demeanor, he had a will of steel, and I think his life shows that.
What do you think he would regard as his greatest achievement, or was he such a modest man that he would never think in those terms?
Well, that's a good question. I think he would probably consider his greatest achievement sticking to his guns and being at the center of this dissident movement in the 1970s, which really was the kind of the embryo of what happened after 1989 when the regime collapsed. He really believed, he was a firm believer in the importance of civil society and the importance that of the kind of the background or the basis of democracy is not necessarily parliament, but people acting freely and individually in groups. And so this notion of the civil society was something that he brought forward and actually propagated all his time in office when he was president.
Right, certainly a life incredibly well lived and to the benefit of all. That's Václav Havla, who's died. We appreciate your time. Thank you very much indeed. Paul Wilson.
Thank you for having me.
Now, the unrest in South